The police station was silent, the kind of silence that feels like a prayer holding its breath. Snow pressed against the windows as a U.S. Marine stood beside his canine, ready to leave. Then the doors burst open. A small girl ran straight to him, clutched his leg, and whispered, "Please don't let her take me." In that moment, he didn't hear orders or rules. He heard something else, a call. And sometimes when God calls, walking away is not an option. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story moves you, subscribe for more stories of courage, faith, and unbreakable bonds. Your support truly means everything. Snow fell relentlessly over Duluth, Minnesota, burying the city in white as winter pressed down with a quiet, suffocating weight. The kind of cold that made even streetlights look tired. Staff Sergeant Nathan Cole stood for a moment beneath the awning of the Duluth police station, letting the wind cut across his face. At 38, Nathan was tall and powerfully built, his frame shaped by decades of military discipline rather than vanity. His shoulders were broad, his stance naturally squared, as if his body had forgotten how to stand any other way. His face was sharply defined with a strong angular jaw, high cheekbones, and a nose that had been broken once in his early 20s, and never bothered him enough to fix perfectly. A short, carefully kept beard traced his jawline, dark with streaks of premature gray, a quiet record of years spent under stress. His eyes were still blue, steady, and observant, the eyes of a man who rarely allowed himself surprise. Nathan had worn a Marine uniform since he was 18. He had crossed deserts, mountains, and cities reduced to rubble. But the memory that stayed with him the longest was not gunfire or explosions. It was the sound of a child crying behind a collapsed wall in a foreign village. A sound that reached him seconds too late. By the time he got there, the silence was permanent. Since that day, children in fear triggered something visceral inside him. A tension he never spoke about and never ignored. At his side stood Rex. Rex was a 4-year-old male German Shepherd canine. His coat a deep amber brown with darker black markings along his spine and muzzle. His fur was thick for winter, well-groomed but practical, dusted with melting snowflakes. Rex was large without being bulky, his muscles dense and controlled, his movements economical. His ears were erect, constantly adjusting, and his dark eyes missed nothing. Unlike many working dogs, Rex did not fidget or strain at the leash. He stood close to Nathan's left leg, calm and alert, radiating a quiet readiness. Rex had been trained to detect explosives, human scent, and stress signals. But more than that, he had learned Nathan's rhythms. The bond between them was not affection alone. It was forged through long nights, harsh drills, and moments when Rex had acted before Nathan could think. Nathan pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped inside. Warm air rushed over them, carrying the familiar smell of old coffee, wet coats, and disinfectant. The lobby was modest, fluorescent lights humming softly, bulletin boards lined with notices, and faded posters. 2 officers behind the front desk looked up and nodded, recognizing the Marine uniform and the K-9 harness. "Evening, Sergeant," one of them said casually. Nathan returned the nod. He was there for routine paperwork, finalizing the transfer of joint K-9 training reports after a multi-agency exercise. Nothing urgent, nothing dramatic. The station was quiet, the kind of quiet that suggested order and predictability. Then the doors slammed open again. Cold air exploded into the lobby, followed by the sound of frantic footsteps. A small figure stumbled inside, slipped on the wet tile, and fell hard. The child cried out softly, not from pain, but fear, and scrambled back to her feet with shaking urgency. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old. Her name, Nathan would soon learn, was Lily. Lily was tiny for her age, her thin frame wrapped in a pink winter coat that was soaked through and torn at the hem. One shoe was missing, exposing a sock already gray with slush. Her pale skin was blotched red from the cold, her lips trembling, her breath coming in shallow, panicked gasps. Blonde hair clung to her face in wet strands, framing eyes that were far too wide for someone so young. Eyes that had learned to expect danger. She did not look around for help. She saw Nathan. With a desperate burst of movement, Lily ran straight toward him and wrapped her arms around his leg, pressing her face into the rough fabric of his uniform trousers as if anchoring herself to solid ground. Her small hands shook violently as she clutched him. "She's coming!" Lily sobbed, her voice breaking apart. "Please, please don't let her take me." The lobby froze. Rex moved instantly. He stepped forward, placing his body between Lily and the rest of the room, his posture shifting from neutral to protective in a heartbeat. His head lowered slightly, muscles tightening beneath his coat. A low, controlled growl vibrated in his chest. Not loud, not wild, but unmistakable. It was a warning, measured and deliberate. Every officer in the station turned toward them. Nathan looked down at the child pressed against him. He felt the cold dampness of her coat seeping through the fabric, felt the violent tremor running through her small body. As he knelt smoothly to her level, he noticed faint bruises circling her wrist, yellow and purple marks shaped unmistakably like adult fingers. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You're safe right now," Nathan said quietly, his voice steady, calm, practiced from years of speaking to people at their worst moments. "No one's taking you." Lily didn't respond. She only clung harder. Footsteps echoed from the hallway behind the desk. Officer Amanda Reed emerged into the lobby with controlled confidence. Amanda was in her early 30s of average height, her build lean and toned from routine fitness rather than strength. Her auburn hair was pulled into a tight regulation bun, not a strand out of place. Her uniform was immaculate despite the weather, badge polished, boots clean. Her face was composed and symmetrical, pale and unmarked by the cold, her blue eyes sharp and assessing. Amanda Reed looked like someone who belonged on recruitment posters. Competent, composed, trustworthy. She carried herself with the easy authority of a person used to being believed. "There you are, Lily," Amanda said evenly, though a subtle tension crept into her jaw. "You can't just run off like that." Rex's growl deepened slightly. Amanda's eyes flicked to the dog for half a second before returning to Nathan. "Sir," she said, her tone professional and measured, "I appreciate your service, but that child is under my legal guardianship. She has a history of behavioral issues." Nathan rose slowly to his full height, positioning his body so Lily remained behind his leg. He did not touch his weapon. He did not raise his voice. He simply met Amanda's gaze. "She's afraid," he said. Amanda sighed softly, the sound carefully controlled. "Children get confused." Near the desk, Sergeant Paul Hargreave, a stocky man in his late 50s with thinning gray hair and deep lines etched into his face, frowned. Paul had spent 30 years on the force and trusted dogs more than paperwork. He watched Rex closely. Canines didn't react like this without reason. Nathan felt Rex's focus lock onto Amanda with unwavering intensity. Outside, snow continued to fall, thick and silent. Through the glass doors, Nathan caught a flicker of movement, a shadow passing beneath a street light just beyond the edge of visibility. Something was coming. He didn't know who Amanda Reed truly was yet. He didn't know what Lily had run from, but he knew this. Rex sensed a threat, and Rex had never been wrong. Nathan tightened his grip on the leash, his instinct sharpening as the cold pressed in from outside. Whatever Lily was running from had not stopped at the door. The lobby did not return to normal after the doors closed. It never truly did. The snow outside kept falling. But inside the Duluth police station, the air thickened with something harder to name. Unease, suspicion. The subtle awareness that a line had been crossed and could not be uncrossed. Staff Sergeant Nathan Cole remained standing near the front desk, his body positioned so Lily stayed behind his right leg, one small hand still gripping the fabric of his trousers as if it were a lifeline. He could feel the tremor in her fingers slowly easing, not because the danger had passed, but because she had decided instinctively that this was where she would stand her ground. Officer Amanda Reed stepped fully into the light, her boots clicking softly against the tile as she approached. Up close, her composure was even more precise. Amanda was the kind of woman who curated herself carefully. Her posture was straight but relaxed, shoulders back, chin level, movements economical. She had a narrow waist and long legs that gave her a subtle authority when she walked, as though space naturally opened for her. Her auburn hair, pulled tight into a bun, reflected discipline rather than vanity, and her pale skin bore no visible marks of fatigue or stress. If there were cracks in her, they were buried deep. Her blue eyes swept the room once before settling on Nathan with a polite, professional focus. "I'm Officer Amanda Reed," she said, extending her badge slightly without pushing it forward, a gesture designed to assert legitimacy without aggression. "That child is under my legal guardianship." She panicked and ran. "It happens." Nathan did not immediately answer. Years of command had taught him the value of silence. Instead, he looked down at Lily. Her shoulders were still hunched, her head tucked low, but she had stopped shaking. Her breathing was uneven, shallow, the breath of a child who had learned to stay quiet when frightened. Rex stood half a step forward now, his body angled toward Amanda, his amber-brown fur bristling slightly along the spine. His eyes never left her. "She doesn't look confused," Nathan said finally. His voice was calm, low, controlled. "She looks scared." Amanda's lips pressed together for a fraction of a second, the smallest crack in her composure. "She has trauma," she replied smoothly. "Outbursts, flight responses. I've been working with her for months." Behind the desk, Sergeant Paul Hargreaves shifted his weight. Paul was a broad, thick-necked man with a permanent slump in his shoulders, the kind of posture built from decades of leaning against squad cars and door frames. His gray hair was thinning at the crown, and deep lines carved his face into something permanently skeptical. He had seen good cops and bad ones, and more than a few who lived somewhere in between. He trusted experience more than paperwork, and dogs more than words. He watched Rex carefully now, his frown deepening. Rex took another deliberate step forward. It was subtle, but it did not go unnoticed. Amanda's eyes flicked down again, this time lingering on the dog. "Is that animal under control?" she asked, her tone still polite, but edged now with irritation. "Yes," Nathan replied. His hand tightened slightly on the leash, not to restrain Rex, but to reassure him. "He's trained to respond to threat indicators." Amanda inhaled slowly through her nose. "Then perhaps you should consider that your presence is escalating a situation that would otherwise be resolved." Nathan met her gaze. "I'm considering the child." A murmur rippled quietly through the station. A few officers exchanged glances. Some looked uncomfortable, others openly annoyed. A Marine stepping into local police procedure was not something anyone wanted to deal with on a winter night. From the hallway near the holding rooms, another officer emerged. Officer Daniel Ruiz was in his late 20s, lean and dark-haired. His uniform slightly rumpled as if he had been pulled away from paperwork. His face was youthful, but his eyes were sharp, restless. He stopped short when he took in the scene. "What's going on?" Ruiz asked. Amanda answered before anyone else could. "A misunderstanding. The child is mine to take home." Lily stiffened immediately. Her fingers dug into Nathan's leg again, harder this time. Rex's growl deepened. No longer just a warning, but a clear statement of refusal. "That's enough," Sergeant Hargreaves said, raising a hand. "Let's slow this down." Amanda turned toward him, her expression tightening. "With respect, Sergeant, I don't need approval to retrieve a child in my care." Nathan felt the shift then, not in Amanda but in the room. Authority was being tested. Lines were being drawn. "There's a protocol," Nathan said. "Emergency child protection. Temporary hold until verification. That's standard." Ruiz blinked. "He's not wrong," he said cautiously. "If the kid's distressed." Amanda's head snapped toward him. "Daniel, stay out of this." The rebuke was sharp enough to make Ruiz flinch. He looked away, jaw tightening. Nathan filed that reaction away. He had learned long ago that the way people corrected others said more than the correction itself. Lily's voice broke the tension, small and barely audible. "She locks the door," she whispered. "At night." Every head turned. Nathan knelt again, bringing himself down to Lily's level. "Can you tell me about that?" he asked gently. Lily hesitated, her eyes flicking toward Amanda, then back to Nathan. "When I'm bad," she said. "When I cry." Amanda exhaled sharply. "She's lying," she said. "She tells stories when she's overwhelmed." Rex's ears flattened slightly, his gaze hardened. Lily swallowed. "She yells," she continued, "and the lights go out and I have to stay quiet." The room was completely silent now. Nathan felt something cold settle into his chest. The same sensation he had felt years ago kneeling in rubble, listening to silence where a voice should have been. He kept his expression neutral, but his body shifted subtly, blocking Amanda's line of sight to the child. "Enough," Sergeant Hargreaves said again, more firmly this time. "We're not handing anyone over without verification." Amanda's composure cracked. "Not fully, but enough." Her shoulders stiffened and her voice rose half an octave. "This is ridiculous. I am a sworn officer of this department." "So am I," Hargreave replied flatly. "And right now the kid's scared. Your dog's reacting and a Marine's invoking protocol." We slow down. Amanda's eyes flashed. For just a second, something raw slipped through. Anger, fear, calculation. She caught it quickly, smoothing her features back into calm professionalism. But it was enough. Nathan saw it. Rex saw it. "All right," Amanda said tightly. "Verify. But I'm not leaving without her." "Then you'll wait," Hargreaves said. Nathan straightened, his muscles tense beneath his jacket. He knew the pressure he was applying simply by being there. A Marine in uniform carried weight, symbolic, moral, sometimes unwelcome. Some officers would resent it. Others would lean on it. Officer Ruiz approached slowly, crouching a few feet away from Lily. "Hey," he said softly. "I'm Daniel. You're okay here?" Lily didn't answer. She pressed closer to Nathan. Rex shifted slightly, positioning himself between Ruiz and Lily until Nathan gave a small nod. Only then did the dog ease, though his eyes never left Amanda. Minutes passed. Paperwork was requested. Calls were made. Amanda stood rigid, arms crossed, her patience thinning with every second. Once she glanced toward the door as if calculating distance and time. Nathan noticed. Outside through the glass, a figure moved past the street light again, briefly visible before disappearing into the curtain of snow. Nathan's instincts sharpened, his pulse steady but alert. Amanda's voice snapped, sharp and brittle. "This is harassment." For the first time, her mask truly slipped. And in that brief, unguarded moment, Nathan understood something crucial. Whatever authority Amanda Reed wore, it was armor. And armor was only necessary when there was something worth hiding. Morning came slowly to Dooth, gray and reluctant, the snowfall thinning into a fine drifting veil that clung to windows and patrol cars like an afterthought. Inside the police station, the night's tension had not melted with the snow. It had settled deeper, packed down by silence, by paperwork pulled from drawers that were rarely opened, by glances exchanged and quickly averted. Staff Sergeant Nathan Cole had not slept. He sat on a wooden bench near the interview rooms. Rex lying at his feet, alert but still, his head resting on his paws, amber eyes half-lit yet tracking every movement. Nathan knew this posture well. Rex was waiting, not resting. Nathan was not officially part of the process unfolding around him. He had no badge from this department, no authority to demand answers. But presence carried its own weight. A Marine and Winterfield uniform, boots dusted with snow, posture unyielding, did not fade easily into the background. Officers lowered their voices when they passed him. Some nodded with quiet respect. Others avoided eye contact entirely. Nathan understood both reactions. He had spent his life moving through systems he did not control, learning when to push and when to simply stand still and let pressure do its work. Lily sat wrapped in a gray departmental blanket in a small side office, a paper cup of hot chocolate cooling untouched on the table in front of her. She looked smaller in the harsh daylight, her pale skin still faintly mottled from the cold, her blonde hair brushed but tangled at the ends. She did not cry now. She had retreated inward, knees pulled up to her chest, arms wrapped tightly around herself as if trying to hold her own pieces together. She watched the door constantly, flinching whenever footsteps passed too close. Nathan noticed how her eyes followed Rex when he shifted, how her breathing steadied when the dog was near. Children recognized safety long before they could explain it. The internal review began quietly. Sergeant Paul Hargreave did not announce it. He simply started pulling files. Paul's hands were thick and rough, the hands of a man who had written reports for decades and hated every minute of it. He moved with a slow deliberation now, reading each page twice, jaw tightening as patterns emerged. Officer Amanda Reed's personnel file was immaculate on the surface: commendations, positive evaluations, volunteer hours logged with care. But beneath that sheen were absences, complaints withdrawn without explanation, notes marked resolved without resolution attached, names of children who appeared briefly in records, then vanished into the vague language of transfers and placements. Officer Daniel Ruiz hovered nearby, uneasily helpful. Daniel was young, his dark hair perpetually disordered, his uniform always just slightly out of regulation. He had joined the force with the naive belief that doing the right thing would be obvious. Watching Paul sift through files, now Daniel felt that belief erode. Some of these reports, he said quietly, they don't add up. They weren't meant to, Paul replied. They were meant to close. Across the station, Amanda Reed sat alone at a metal table, arms folded tightly across her chest. In the clear morning light, the strain showed more clearly on her face. Her posture remained straight, disciplined, but her jaw was clenched, a faint muscle twitching beneath her pale skin. She had always believed in control, control of routine, control of perception, control of outcomes. Losing that control, even incrementally, felt like suffocation. She watched Nathan through the glass, her eyes hardening each time Rex lifted his head or shifted position. When a K-9 unit from a neighboring jurisdiction arrived to assist, the temperature in the room changed again. Officer Sarah Mitchell entered with her partner, a sable-coated Belgian Malinois named Co. Sarah was in her early 40s, tall and lean, her build wiry rather than muscular, shaped by years of handling dogs stronger than herself. Her dark hair was cut short and stray with gray at the temples. Her skin weathered from long hours outdoors. Her eyes were sharp and observant, softened only when she looked at her dog. Sarah had been bitten once early in her career during a domestic call gone wrong. An injury that had left a thin white scar along her forearm and a permanent weariness of situations where authority and violence overlapped behind closed doors. Kata was younger than Rex, barely 3, restless but disciplined, his movements quick and precise. He glanced at Rex with interest, then settled, recognizing a fellow working dog. When Sarah listened to the brief explanation and watched Rex's posture around Amanda, her expression grew serious. "That's not random," she said quietly. "That's stress response. Targeted." Amanda protested when her personal belongings were brought in for inspection. Her gym bag, her jacket, a pair of gloves retrieved from her locker. She insisted on procedure, on rights, on dignity. Nathan stood apart as Rex was brought forward. The leash passed to Sarah for neutrality. Rex approached each item methodically, sniffing with care. He ignored the bag, paused at the jacket, then stiffened, his ears flattening, a low sound rumbling from his chest that echoed faintly off the walls. His body tensed, tail rigid, eyes fixed. Sarah did not touch him. She didn't need to. She had seen this reaction before. "He's detecting elevated stress markers," she said. "And something else?" Repeated exposure. Amanda's voice cut through the room. "This is absurd. Dogs don't determine guilt." "No," Sarah replied evenly. "But they noticed patterns humans learn to ignore." The review expanded outward, no longer confined to the station. A request was made for medical records. Took time. Hours passed. Snow drifted again outside. Light and persistent, Nathan paced once, then stopped, forcing himself into stillness. He felt the familiar pull of conflict inside him. He had not come here to intervene. He had a flight scheduled, a base expecting him. Marines were trained to respect jurisdiction, to avoid entanglements that could compromise missions. But every time he looked at Lily, small, silent, braced for impact, he felt the echo of that long-ago village, the child he had failed to reach. What would happen if he walked away? The answer settled heavily in his chest. When the medical file finally arrived, it was older than anyone expected. A pediatric report from 2 years earlier, then another, and another emergency room visits logged under vague causes. Falls, accidents, clumsiness, no follow-up investigations, no mandated reports filed. The dates formed a pattern, clusters following periods when Lily had been under Amanda's sole supervision. Paul read the report slowly, then set it down with a quiet finality. "We have a problem," he said. The room fell silent. Amanda's composure fractured completely then. "You're making a mistake," she snapped, standing abruptly. "You think you know what this is?" Nathan felt Rex rise beside him, the dog's body pressing lightly against his leg in a familiar gesture of readiness. Nathan did not move, did not speak. He did not need to. Sarah met Paul's gaze. "This needs to go federal." Paul nodded once. The decision weighed on him, but it was clear. "I'll make the call." Lily looked up at Nathan, then her eyes searching his face. He knelt in front of her again, lowering himself until they were level. "You did the right thing," he said softly. "You're not in trouble." For the first time, Lily nodded. As agents were contacted and procedures initiated, Amanda Reed was escorted from the room, her badge removed, her protests echoing briefly down the hallway before fading. Nathan watched her go, noting not triumph, but something colder. Relief edged with sadness. Systems failed quietly, he had learned. Repairing them was never clean when the call to Federal Child Protection Services was placed. The station seemed to exhale. Snow continued to fall, covering old footprints, hiding what had come before. But beneath that blanket, truths had surfaced, sharp and undeniable. Nathan sat back down on the bench, Rex, settling beside him once more. He did not know how this would end, only that it had to move forward now, and that once snow melted, what it revealed could never be buried again. The conference room on the second floor of the Duluth police station felt smaller than it should have, its pale walls closing in beneath the weight of what was about to happen. Outside the narrow windows, snow continued to fall in slow, deliberate sheets, softening the city, while inside, every word carried the potential to cut. Staff Sergeant Nathan Cole stood near the back of the room, hands clasped loosely behind him, Rex lying at his feet in a calm but vigilant sprawl. The dog's amber eyes tracked movement with quiet intelligence, ears twitching at every shift of tension. Nathan's presence was tolerated, not invited, but no one had asked him to leave. Not yet. Officer Amanda Reed sat at the long table facing the review panel. In daylight, stripped of the hurried authority of the previous night. She looked different. Still composed, still precise, but the cracks were harder to hide. Amanda was dressed in a pressed uniform. Her auburn hair pulled back as tightly as ever, but the skin beneath her eyes carried faint shadows now, and her jaw remained clenched as if she were bracing against an invisible blow. She sat straight-backed, shoulders squared, projecting discipline and control. Amanda had built her identity on order. Disorder terrified her. Across from her sat representatives from Internal Affairs and Child Protective Services. One of them, Dr. Helen Moore, had arrived that morning. Helen was a woman in her early 50s, slender and soft-spoken, with silver-thread dark hair worn loose at her shoulders and warm brown eyes that missed very little. She had spent decades working with traumatized children, and had learned to recognize truth not only in words, but in silences, in posture, in the way a child's hands curled inward when recalling fear. Lily sat beside Dr. Moore, small feet dangling above the floor. She wore borrowed clothes, a pale blue sweater too large for her thin frame, and dark leggings rolled at the ankles. Her blonde hair was neatly brushed now, but her fingers twisted constantly. In the hem of her sleeve, she did not look at Amanda. She did not look at anyone except Rex, whose calm presence grounded her in the room. Amanda spoke first. "I've done nothing wrong," she said, her voice measured. "Professional. Lily has a documented history of emotional instability. She fabricates stories under stress. I have followed procedure at every step. A murmur rippled through the room, restrained but uneasy. Dr. Moore leaned slightly toward Lily. Would you like to tell them what happens at night? She asked gently. Lily hesitated. Her chest rose and fell quickly. Nathan felt his own breath slow deliberately, unconsciously modeling calm. Rex lifted his head, eyes softening as Lily glanced toward him. After a long moment, Lily nodded. She locks the door, Lily said quietly. Not my door. The big door. The one that makes the house quiet. Her voice trembled, but she kept going. When I cry, she says, I'm bad. She turns off the lights. I can't come out. Amanda's chair scraped loudly against the floor as she shifted. That's not true, she said sharply. She's confusing dreams with reality. Dr. Moore did not look at Amanda. Lily, she continued. What happens if you try to open the door? Lily swallowed hard. It doesn't open. And if I make noise, she gets mad. The room was silent now. Nathan felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the echo of long-buried guilt rising unbidden. He had heard similar words once before, spoken by a child whose voice had been lost beneath rubble and smoke. He pushed the memory down, focusing on the present, on the fact that this child was still speaking. Internal Affairs presented the evidence next. Medical records laid out in careful sequence. Dates, injuries, explanations that did not quite align. Surveillance stills from Amanda's home showing Lily entering and exiting rooms alone at hours that made no sense for a child her age. Each piece was small on its own. Together, they formed a pattern too clear to ignore. Amanda's composure frayed further with each slide. Her eyes darted now, her breathing shallow. You're twisting things, she insisted. You're taking everything out of context. Sergeant Paul Hargreave sat at the edge of the panel, his thick hands folded on the table. He looked older than he had the night before, the weight of responsibility pressing visibly on his shoulders. Context doesn't explain bruises, he said quietly. Amanda turned toward him, anger flashing openly. Now, you're letting an outsider undermine this department. Nathan stepped forward then, just one pace, but the shift was unmistakable. Every eye turned toward him. I didn't come here to accuse anyone, Nathan said. His voice was low, steady, carrying without effort. I came here because a child ran to me in the snow and begged not to be taken away. Amanda scoffed. And that makes you an expert. No, Nathan replied. It makes me someone who listens. He gestured subtly toward Rex. My dog reacted to her fear before anyone spoke a word. He reacted again when Officer Reed approached. Canines are trained to detect stress, threat, and escalation. Rex has never reacted like that without reason. Amanda laughed harshly, the sound brittle. So now dogs decide guilt. Nathan met her gaze evenly. No, but when a child is terrified and a trained canine confirms that fear is real, ignoring it becomes a choice. Silence settled again, heavier than before. Dr. Moore placed a gentle hand over Lily's. You did very well, she said softly. The decision came shortly after. Amanda Reed was placed on immediate administrative leave, her badge and weapon removed pending further investigation. Federal child protection authorities would assume custody of Lily, effective immediately. The words were spoken formally, clinically, but their impact rippled through the room. Amanda stood abruptly, her chair tipping back before clattering to the floor. For a moment, she looked less like an officer and more like a cornered animal. Eyes wild, face flushed. You're making a mistake, she said harshly. You have no idea what you're doing. No one responded. 2 officers escorted her from the room. Her footsteps echoed down the hallway, sharp and angry, until the door closed and the sound vanished. Lily exhaled shakily. Dr. Moore drew her gently into an embrace, careful not to overwhelm her. Rex rose and padded closer, sitting beside Lily with deliberate calm. She reached out and rested her hand against his fur, her fingers sinking into its warmth. For the first time since Nathan had met her, Lily smiled. A small, uncertain curve of her lips, but real. Later, as arrangements were finalized, Nathan stood alone near the window, watching snow gather on the ledge outside. He felt no triumph, only a quiet, sobering awareness of consequences. Truth, once uncovered, did not stop moving. Spread, touched lives, demanded reckoning. Sergeant Hargreave joined him, clearing his throat. "You did the right thing," he said gruffly. Nathan nodded once. "It wasn't my call to make." "But you stayed," Paul replied. "Most wouldn't." Nathan glanced toward Lily, now speaking softly with Dr. Moore as Rex lay watchfully at her side. "Some things don't let you walk away," he said. By evening, Nathan gathered his things. Orders waited. Flights did not. He knelt one last time in front of Lily. "You're safe now," he told her. Lily studied him. "Seriously, are you going away?" "Yes," he admitted. She nodded, accepting it with the weary understanding of someone older than her years. "Okay." As Nathan walked toward the exit, Rex rising smoothly beside him, a familiar unease settled in his gut. This chapter was ending, but he knew better than to believe the story was finished. Outside, snow fell harder again, erasing tracks almost as soon as they formed. But the truth had already broken through the surface, and once revealed, it would keep moving. Spring did not arrive in Dooth with celebration or announcement. It crept in quietly, almost apologetically, as if winter were reluctant to loosen its grip. Snowbanks shrank by inches each day, revealing dark earth beneath, and the air softened just enough to remind the city that cold was not permanent. For Lily, that change mattered more than anyone could have guessed. She lived now in a modest blue house at the edge of town, its paint chipped in places, its porch narrow and slightly uneven. To Lily it felt enormous, not because of its size, but because no doors were ever locked behind her. Her foster parents, Mark and Evelyn Turner, understood that safety was not something you explained to a child like Lily. It was something you demonstrated consistently, patiently, without expectation of gratitude. Mark Turner was a broad-shouldered man in his mid-40s. His body shaped by years of physical labor rather than exercise. His hands were scarred and rough, the skin cracked from sawdust and cold. But when he handed Lily a glass of water or helped her with her shoes, his movements were gentle and unhurried. He had grown up in foster care himself, moving between houses where silence was survival. It had made him quiet, observant, and deeply allergic to anger. He did not raise his voice ever. Evelyn Turner was smaller, slender, with warm brown eyes and a soft voice that never rushed. Her hair, light brown threaded with early gray, was usually braided loosely over one shoulder. She worked as a classroom aide at a local elementary school, and she carried that patience home with her, understanding instinctively when to speak and when to sit beside Lily in silence. At night, she left the hallway light on. Every night, no explanations given. The first weeks were difficult. Lily startled at the sound of the furnace kicking on. She froze when Mark closed the garage door too firmly. She slept lightly, waking at the smallest shift in the house. Evelyn never asked her why. She simply stayed. There was a dog, too. Milo had been with the Turners long before Lily arrived. A golden retriever nearing 10 years old. His muzzle silvered with age, his movements slower now, deliberate and careful. Milo had arthritis in his hips and slept more than he moved, but he had an uncanny sense for sadness. He positioned himself near Lily whenever she sat on the floor, his warm body a constant presence. Lily learned to rest her hand against his rib cage, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing. Calmed her in ways words never could. School was harder. The building was bright and noisy, full of sudden sounds and slamming lockers. Lily sat near the back of her classroom, shoulders hunched, eyes constantly tracking exits. She spoke little at first. Her teacher, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and careful hands, did not force participation. Slowly, Lily began to draw. Houses with many windows, dogs, snow falling, but always with sunlight behind it. The drawings changed gradually. Doors began to appear open. The case against Amanda Reed moved forward steadily, stripped of drama, but heavy with consequence. Testimonies were taken, reports re-examined, patterns acknowledged too late. Amanda stood trial without the armor of her badge. Her once perfect posture rigid with defiance that eventually gave way to something brittle and hollow. The sentence was not harsh enough to undo harm, but it was firm enough to send a message that authority no longer excused cruelty. The Duluth Police Department did not transform overnight. Institutions never did. But policies changed. Oversight increased. Training expanded. Some officers left unwilling to adapt. Others stayed and learned to look closer. Sergeant Paul Hargreave retired quietly a month later. At his small farewell gathering, he said only one thing worth remembering. Next time a kid runs into the snow, we don't ask why they ran. We ask what they ran from. Staff Sergeant Nathan Cole returned to Duluth on a morning when the snow fell lightly melting as it touched the ground. He arrived without ceremony, dressed in civilian clothes, dark jacket, worn jeans, boots softened by years of use. The uniform stayed folded in his duffel bag, still part of him, but not what he needed today. Rex walked beside him, off-leash. Retirement had changed Rex suddenly. His amber-brown coat was dusted with gray along the muzzle now. His movements slower, but his awareness remained razor-sharp. He no longer scanned crowds for threats. Instead, he watched for fear. Lily stood on the porch when Nathan approached Milo beside her. She was taller now, her blonde hair longer, tied back with a ribbon Evelyn had chosen carefully. She did not run to him. She walked forward slowly, studying his face. Then Rex's. "You came back," she said as if confirming something important. Nathan nodded. "I said I would." Rex sat immediately, tail thumping once against the porch boards. Lily hesitated, then reached out, burying her fingers into his fur. Rex leaned into the touch, eyes closing briefly. Lily laughed, a quiet surprise sound as though she had not expected joy to come so easily. They sat together on the porch steps while Mark and Evelyn watched from inside, careful to give space. Lily talked about school, about Milo's bad hip, about a picture she had drawn that now hung on the refrigerator. She did not talk about locked doors or dark rooms. She did not need to. Nathan listened. He felt something ease inside him, a tension he had carried for years loosening at last. He had spent his life believing that saving someone meant decisive action, force, speed. Duluth had taught him something else. Sometimes saving someone meant staying still, taking the weight, and refusing to leave when it would be easier to go. When it was time to leave, Lily hugged Rex tightly, then surprised Nathan by hugging him, too. It was brief, awkward, sincere. Nathan and Rex walked back down the porch steps as snow began to fall again, light and harmless. Lily stood watching until they disappeared down the road. Nathan did not look back. He did not need to. Behind him, a child was growing up without fear of the night, and that was enough. Sometimes miracles don't arrive as thunder or light from the sky. Sometimes they come quietly through a stranger who chooses not to walk away. Through a moment when someone listens instead of turning their head, through a heart that still remembers how to protect. God does not always send angels with wings. Sometimes he sends them in ordinary forms, a steady hand, a loyal dog, a person who stands in the right place at the right time and refuses to move. In our daily lives, we may never face a night like the one in this story. But every day we are given smaller chances to notice fear, to offer safety, to choose kindness when it would be easier to stay silent. Those choices matter. They ripple outward in ways we may never see. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect on the people around you. There may be someone nearby who needs protection, patience, or simply to be heard. Please share this story so its message can reach others. Leave a comment and tell us what this story meant to you or where you are watching from. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future stories of hope, courage, and quiet miracles. May God bless you, watch over you and your loved ones, and guide you through every storm until the snow melts and the light returns.